Hey everyone, welcome back to Best Ever PC Benchmark channel. In today's video, we're going to be benchmarking Days Gone Remastered at both 1080p and 1440p resolutions. I'll be testing how this game performs on my high-end PC setup, featuring the AMD Ryzen 7 9800 X3D, 64GB of DDR5 RAM, and the ROG Strix GeForce RTX 3090. We'll be looking at frame rates, visual quality, and performance to see how it handles at these two resolutions. So if you've been wondering how Days Gone Remastered runs on a high-end rig at 1080p and 1440p, stick around for the full benchmark. For the test, I've set Days Gone Remastered to ultra settings across the board, with only minor tweaks like turning off motion blur for smoother gameplay. We'll be running the game at 1080p and 1440p resolutions to see how it performs at both. In this section, let's go over some of the settings I'll be testing, including the texture quality, shadow settings, and the level of detail in the game world. I'll also be switching between these two resolutions during the benchmarks, so you'll get a direct comparison of how each one performs. I ran multiple benchmark tests throughout Days Gone Remastered, capturing performance data using CapFrameX and Riva Tuner to monitor FPS, GPU, and CPU usage. These stats help us get a clear picture of how the game performs under load, while also tracking frame timings and 1% lows to check for any frame drops. The benchmarking was done across a variety of in-game scenarios, from open-world exploration to intense combat sequences, to give you an idea of how the game performs during different types of gameplay. Let's take a look at some extended gameplay footage from both 1080p and 1440p resolutions. As you can see, the gameplay at 1080p remains smooth, with solid performance and minimal drops in FPS. The game runs flawlessly in the more open-world sections, and even during some of the more intense combat sequences, the frame rates stay consistent. When we switch to 1440p, the game looks absolutely stunning. The textures pop more, the lighting is richer, and the overall level of detail is significantly enhanced. However, as you might expect, the performance does dip slightly. At 1440p, I noticed a small but noticeable reduction in FPS, but it's still very playable, especially considering the visual gains. Let's take a closer look at the difference in performance. So, what exactly do we get when switching from 1080p to 1440p? The most noticeable change is the increase in visual fidelity. At 1440p, the textures are sharper, the lighting is more dynamic, and you get a much richer view of the game world. Shadows are more detailed, and overall, the game feels more immersive. However, there's a slight performance trade-off. In more intense scenes, such as heavy combat or large hordes of enemies, the FPS drops by around 60 to 70 FPS. Still, at 1440p, the game is certainly more visually appealing, making the trade-off worth it for many players. Now, let's talk about temperature and power consumption. With both resolutions, I monitored the GPU and CPU temperatures using Riva Tuner, and I also tracked the system's overall power usage. At 1080p, my system ran fairly cool, with the GPU maintaining temperatures around 80 degrees Celsius and the CPU around 84 degrees Celsius. Power draw was also reasonable, hovering around 600 watts. I noticed that at 1440p, temperatures did rise a bit, with the GPU hitting around 81 degrees Celsius and CPU temps climbing to 90 degrees Celsius. The power consumption also increased slightly, but it was manageable for my rig. Now, let's talk about how other GPUs might perform in Days Gone Remastered. While we tested the game using the RTX 3090, we can also make a general comparison with mid-range cards like the RTX 3070 or RTX 3080. Based on performance trends, you can expect 1080p gameplay to run smoothly on these GPUs, with FPS averaging around 60 FPS or higher, but when switching to 1440p, the performance may dip a bit, especially with the RTX 3070. For the RTX 3080, the performance will be closer to the RTX 3090, but slightly lower in some demanding scenes. Of course, not everyone has access to a high-end GPU like the RTX 3090, so I also ran some benchmarks with the game set to medium and low settings at both 1080p and 1440p. The performance boost here was quite noticeable, especially at 1440p. At 1080p medium, the game runs at an incredibly high FPS, easily hitting 250 FPS even during demanding sequences. At 1440p medium, the game was still very playable, with FPS averaging around 200 FPS. This is a great option for those with mid-range systems who want to balance visual quality and performance. I want to hear from you all. What resolution do you prefer for Days Gone Remastered? Are you more focused on visual quality at 1440p, or do you prioritize smoother performance at 1080p? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences with the game. Also, if you've tried the game on different GPUs, let me know how it performs on your rig. Thanks for watching, everyone! To sum it up, Days Gone Remastered performs very well on high-end systems at both 1080p and 1440p. If you're playing at 1080p, you get smooth, stable performance, while 1440p offers an immersive visual experience with only a slight dip in FPS. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts on the game and any other benchmarks you'd like to see. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. I'll see you in the next one.